Good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining us for our latest episode on Journeys of Challenge. I recently started a podcast where identifying various challenges in life and learning from the opportunities that are within these challenges. And we're honored and with great pleasure to welcome our guest here tonight, a very noted Talmud Chacham Torah scholar from the southern part of the state, Rabbi Berish Braun, whose day job is the assistant Rosh Kollel of the famous Miami Beach Kollel on Chase Avenue in Miami Beach, a landmark, a Makam Torah in South Florida. And in addition to that, he's also a Dayan, a rabbinic judge of the Beit Din of South Florida, a very noted and prestigious Beis Din that we work with in Jacksonville as well. And that Beis Din oversees Gittin, divorces, as well as conversion. So we're going to be focusing on conversion today as an area of challenge in life. And I'd just like to extend a warm welcome to Rabbi Braun. So thank you so much for coming on today.
My pleasure. Good evening to you. It's always a pleasure to be in Jacksonville. Usually involves driving about 5 hours and either on the way up to New York or on the way back. So it's always a pleasure to see the community, the shul, Eitz Chaim, and to follow the growth of the community. And we wish you much hatzlacha. Obviously, we've been more in contact with conversions, actually, coming down from Jacksonville to the Beis Din here than probably anything else. Although some kids go to Beis Yaakov. A pleasure to be here.
All right, thank you so much for making the time. I know you have a very busy schedule, and we greatly appreciate it. So if you could just give us a little background first about the Beis Din of South Florida. How long ago did that start? Did that Beis Din start? Who's on it and what it oversees before we talk about conversion itself.
All right. I mean, the starting of the Beis Din and the way the Beis Din started is actually very integrated and involved in the whole concept of what we're discussing tonight and conversion itself. About 15 years ago, I don't remember exactly, there was, perhaps even longer than that, almost 20 years, there was some issue with a lot of Beit Din in America with conversions. Each shul, each rabbi used to have his own standard, his own, put together 3 rabbis and made a Beis Din. Sometimes it was people under pressure. I mean, imagine if a rabbi in a shul and his president's daughter comes back from college, or son comes back from college with a non-Jewish boyfriend or girlfriend and says, Rabbi, we've got to make it happen. A little conflict of interest between the rabbi and his job as rabbi and his job as Dayan, for representative of the Jewish people of Klal Yisrael. And there's certain places, there are certain rabbanim in certain rabbis, their standards were less. And, it's very nice if you have your own standards for, your local kashrus, if you have your own standards for your mechitza in your shul or whatever, your social events in the shul, that's between you and your community. But when you're dealing with conversion, obviously it involves the children, involves the Jewish people as a whole, involves the continuity of Klal Yisrael. So there was a movement both here in America and in Eretz Yisrael, where Eretz Yisrael sort of the overseeing body organization, where they would research conversions done in America or anywhere in Chutz La'aretz of people that wanted to make Aliyah. And in Israel, there are 2 processes. I don't get involved in the whole thing, but there's citizenship, there's social services and stuff, and then there's the Rabbanut, marriage, divorce, and burial, 2 separate things. But when it comes to religious things, they would check out to make sure they could do a chasana on a couple or this person, and they noticed that there was an inconsistency with Beit Dinim. So they approached Rabbi Gross, Rosh Kollel here in Miami, and said, listen, we're trying to do this in many places. We want to set up a Beis Din, not with the local rabbi, not with the rabbi in the shul. Let the rabbi in the shul be an advocate. Let him run the conversion. Let him try to get as much as possible. And let's have a second opinion, a backstop, checks and balances of an outside independent Beis Din. So they went looking around the country, and we actually found, we didn't find it, but they reported Rav Mendelson the Ravik. Rav Mendelson the Ravik was the Rosh Kollel in Milwaukee, and the Rosh Beis Din of the Beis Din in Milwaukee. He travels anyway around the country for Gittin, and when he goes for Gittin, often he does Geirus as well in far-flung cities. So it was sort of a natural fit that he should come to Miami, and instead of just coming as needed like he does in other cities, he would come on a regular basis. As a matter of fact, he was just in Jacksonville last week. That was an on-need basis. There was a few getting locally, so he came. So here we set up once every 6 weeks, once every 4 weeks. He would come down and do Geirus. The time Gittin was done by Rabbi Leophil Zatzal. Rabbi Leophil has since passed away, so we're getting a little bit more of those Gittin as well. But that's how it was set up. It was set up to be independent from the local rabbis. So they didn't want Rabbi Gross to be on it. He's the rabbi. Had put me, Rabbi Yukusil Stern. Many people know him. And initially we had Rabbi Eli Smith, and now his brother-in-law Rabbi Citron. Very important. Big Talmid Chachamim, Yirei Shemayim, but from the Chabad community, because pretty much Chabad owns Florida. I mean, I tell the people, you drop a dart in the map of Florida, chances are it's going to be within 2 miles of a Chabad house. So simply knowing the Rabbanim and knowing the people and creating trust and understanding between the local Chabad Shluchim and the Beis Din, it's definitely necessary somebody that speaks the language, that know them, of common friends and Jewish geography with all of them. And like anything else, different Rabbanim have different standards, like we mentioned, and somebody that's within the community knows the local Rabbanim and knows which ones, what their standards are, and how much we can trust them without putting our input, how much we need to put our own input in. So that's how the Beis Din started. And that's what we're doing pretty much till today. We're involved. We don't actually do the conversion process. That we leave to the rabbis. So the overseer, and we actually do the Geirus itself. And we're sort of more critical and let the rabbis be more pushy and positive. And it's a partnership between the two of us, between the Beis Din and the local rabbis.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Braun, for clarifying the background. We in Jacksonville are also familiar with Rabbi Senderovic as a Masader Gittin, as an officiating rabbi of divorces, and he comes in as an as-needed basis. And like you outlined that process, I can just say from my end as a shul rabbi here in North Florida, it's a relatively small community.
Right.
Our role, or my role specifically as a shul rabbi, congregational rabbi, is to sponsor the conversion candidate and be in touch with your Beis Din as the process goes along. So it's definitely been very informative for me and educational to watch you from a distance and seeing all the great work that you do. So I just want to say on behalf of Klal Yisrael, I don't know if I can represent Klal Yisrael, but the Florida Jewish community, North Florida, we appreciate everything that you and Rabbi Senderovic and the other Chavri Beis Din. If we can just take a step back now, just to talk about conversion, because I think there's a lot of facts and also myths and maybe misconceptions along. So if you can just take a step back about conversion and talk about, there's this general idea that as opposed to, I guess, lahavdil, the other major religions that encourage conversion to their religion, Judaism does not encourage Geirus, at least at the outset. So can you please explain why that is so?
It's interesting. We had a story recently. A couple came and they want to convert. They're very motivated. They live on the outskirts of a community here in South Florida. And they said they have a 90-year-old mother. And the 90-year-old mother had a number of strokes, whatever the details are not that important, but the concept, and they were desperate to get the mother converted. She's not well, I don't know. And I told them, I said, you're coming from a different place. Certain religions believe if you don't accept their whatever it should be, whatever they say for us. In Klal Yisrael, there are two concepts. We believe in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, believe the Torah is given Har Sinai. We know Hashem is Hashem is the God. What Hashem says, what we have to do. That's universal. But another truth is that Hashem made two roles in life, two roles in this world. There's Noach and Avraham. And you go through the Parshas, you go through the Rashis, you go through the Psukim, and you'll notice it. Just a quick example of this. It says that the difference between who was greater, Noach or Avram. The Medrash says that Noach needed support. Yitzarach Said. Noach needed support in his way, so God had to support Noach. But Avram, it says he went on his own, he didn't. The concept is that Hashem created the world with humanity, with mankind. And he said, keep the Shabbat mitzvahs b'nei Noach, believe in Hashem, live a just life, have courts. The Shabbat mitzvahs b'nei Noach, don't be cruel, be honest. But also, when Hashem created the world, Midrashim, we see Hashem said the world is not going to stand because Midas Adin, the force of judgment, is too hard on this world. And the concept that Hashem, God made the flood, people couldn't survive by themselves. Hashem said, we need something else. We need a support for the non-Jews, and that's the Jewish people. The Jewish people are here to support the humanity, support the world in their mission. But they're two different missions. Non-Jews have their mission, and there's a concept of Chasidei Humas Olam. They believe in Hashem and keep a moral life because of their belief in Hashem, because they know Hashem commanded it. They have eternal reward as well. Hashem said there is a group of people that have to be sort of the leaders or the conscious for the world. And that's the Jewish people. And there are different roles in life, just like in any company, in any business, in any sports team, lahavdil. People have different jobs. So we believe we have different jobs. A Kohen has his job. Men have their jobs. Women have their jobs. Jews have their jobs. And non-Jews have their job in this world. And what Hashem wants from each group is to stay within their group, not to say, if a person says they want to become a Kohen or a Kohen wants to become a non-Kohen, we laugh at it. Like, this is what God gave you. This is your requirements, your restrictions, your limitations, and your privileges. The same thing. God said the Jews have their restrictions, their requirements, their obligations, their privileges, and non-Jews have theirs. Hashem did say that there's a bridge, there's a possibility for a non-Jew to change his requirement, to change his destiny. Not necessary, not required, not at all required. It's sort of extra. It's more than that's required. It's the extra credit. And that's what conversion process is. We all know the Medrash tells us that God gave us the Torah at Mount Sinai. And before he gave it to the Jews, he asked the non-Jews, do you want the Torah? And the Medrash says, they said, what's written in it? And each nation says it doesn't fit with our personality, doesn't fit with our culture. We can't go ahead with the Jews. The Medrash says there were certain souls within each nation that it said it does fit. It does resonate with my soul. It does resonate with my essence of who I am. And those were the converts throughout the generations. But the difference is that in Jews we believe there's eternity. There's fulfillment in life by being a Chasidei Umas Olam, by being a non-Jew that lives with the requirements of a non-Jew. And a Jew lives with the requirements of a Jew. That's the reason why we don't encourage conversion, we don't push it. And also it's a famous Gemara. The Gemara says, Kasha Gerim Yisrael Kisapachas, says that converts are difficult to the Jewish people. Kisapachas, it's sort of like and there's many different opinions of what that means. The famous one, obviously, is Tosa says that those say that converts are much better at doing the mitzvahs than the Jews, and they make us look bad. But simply, people, if they weren't raised with it, it wasn't in their culture, it's difficult for them to do it, and they sort of struggle with the requirements and the lifestyle of Taryag mitzvahs. And once they become Jewish, it's a drag on them, and it's a drag on Jewish people. So Hashem says, excel in what you have, excel in what you are, as opposed to trying to switch and become Jewish. So that's the reason why we don't encourage conversions generally.
So thank you for your insight. So just as a follow-up, a comment to that, just to make sure I understand what you said. So it is possible for a non-Jew to have a meaningful relationship with Hashem. He or she doesn't have to convert with Judaism. They can be in the category of Chasidei Umas Olam, righteous non-Jews, believe in God, practice the Noahide laws, and have a fulfilling spiritual life. Is that correct?
That's correct. I mean, the people translate the Shabbat mitzvah to Noach as the universal laws. I mean, they're the laws of human beings to live a moral life, but on the condition that it comes from an understanding that it comes from Hashem.
Right. Okay.
Mooning Hashem, that's an important component.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying that. But let's move on to the demographic that says, for whatever reason, that's not enough for me. And I'm sure you've heard those words over the years. I've heard those words. I'm sure you've heard them a lot more. It's not enough for me. Sheva mitzvahs b'nei Noach. I know I can have a meaningful relationship with Hashem, but I feel I need to convert. So tell us a little about the process. If you can just outline, obviously, it sometimes depends on each individual or various circumstances, but if there's some sort of general outline of what the process is, and also is there, I guess a follow-up to that, is there like a general length of time, or it always varies on the particular individual and circumstance?
Yeah, I would just go back a little bit on the last question. I just want to say there are many different scenarios of conversions. Obviously the ones that comes to mind when you think of conversion is somebody on their own saying, I want to convert. But practically speaking, I'm sure you as a rabbi have experienced this. We have many cases where people are sort of forced into conversion. Adoption, generally, Moshe Feinstein says somebody adopting, they should adopt a non-Jew. Intermarried spouses that are doing tshuva, they're coming back, and they're both doing it together. Sometimes it's a non-Jewish spouse which is encouraging the Jewish spouse to do it. And then there are other technical cases, surrogate parenthood, where it's questionable. And then there's the case of people that were raised Jewish their whole life. Their mother had a conversion, or they thought they had a conversion, or their grandmother had a conversion, whether it's Reform or conservative or some other non-recognized conversion. And in which case, halacha might look at them as not Jewish, but culturally they're Jewish. They raised their whole life as Jewish. They're going to marry a Jew. That's all they know. In those cases, obviously, we encourage conversion, or we encourage the process. But the process is the same. In all cases, the process is all the same. The technical process of conversion involves 3 or 4 steps. There's for man, bris milah. We all know last week's parsha, Avraham Avinu joining the covenant of Avraham. The bris milah for men. Somebody had a circumcision before when they weren't Jewish. Then there's hatafas dam bris, there's the prick of blood, and women that doesn't apply. And then there are 3 other steps. There's going into the mikveh, that we all know, going into the mikveh and coming out of the mikveh. The concept of mikveh is the same as all other going into mikveh, whether it's tefillas kelim or tefillah from tumah. You sort of lose yourself back into the reality of physical reality. You lose yourself, you become batal. You go into the water, and it's as if you don't exist anymore. When you come out, you're a new entity. That's the concept, general concept of mikveh. So a person goes in, for tshuva, there's mikveh as well. A person goes into the mikveh, he comes out Jewish. And there's one other step. We'll get to the last step in a minute. And there's another step that people don't always remember, and that's to bring a carbon. Somebody that converts has got to bring 2 birds as a carbon in the Beis Hamikdash. And originally the custom would be to set aside money for the carbon, for the sacrifice, with the hope and the just make it real that when Mashiach comes, the Beis Hamikdash will be, I owe the carbon, I can't wait to do it. Now, obviously, we hold that it's not ma'akev, it's not critical to the process, and the process works even without the carbon, but the carbon is owed. Any convert owes that carbon. And then the last step and the final step, which is the complicated step, is Kabbalas ol mitzvahs, accepting upon yourself 613 mitzvahs, so the ones that are applicable of the 613. That's where the issue comes in. Like we mentioned earlier, a non-Jew is commanded with 7 mitzvahs. A whole lifestyle is a non-Jew. The concept of conversion is I want more than that. I want to accept the requirements of a Jew, the obligations of a Jew, the prohibitions of being a Jew. And I accept that upon myself. Now, there's a difference between kiruv, outreach, Jewish outreach, and conversions. And this is where it gets a little hazy and fuzzy, and people have to remember that doing kiruv, somebody's not religious or they're becoming religious, every mitzvah they do, everything they take on is amazing, it's great. Somebody's, they keep kosher at home, great. When I'm traveling, I can't keep you. We say, okay, one day you'll get there. Whatever it should be, any of the mitzvahs that are difficult on a person, we say, good, take on what you can, and you'll get reward for that. And it's between you and God, between you and Hashem, the things that you do and the things that you don't do. you do 99% of the mitzvahs, you get credit for 99. You do 1% of the mitzvahs, you get credit for 1%. Conversion, if somebody says, listen, I could convert, I'll do everything. I'm just happen to believe in, animal rights, and I can't bring a Korban Pesach. Korban Pesach is not relevant today because we don't have, but I can convert on condition I don't bring a Korban Pesach or I can't accept it. It's not a conversion. 99% acceptance is 0% acceptance in conversion, which creates a problem. And here's where the problem is. If you see people converted and then you know about the family or whatever, and they weren't keeping everything at the time of the conversion. The question is, did they accept everything and they're not keeping it? Just like some Jews, speak Lashon Hara or whatever it should be. It doesn't mean we don't accept it. In which case, it's a good conversion if you accepted it, but you're not keeping it. If you figured, you know what, I could get by without doing these, that's a different story. So that's where the question. So that's where this whole process, we call the process of conversion, comes from. A person, a potential convert, is going to go into the mikveh, and the rabbi is going to ask them, "Do you accept upon yourself all of Torah mitzvahs?" We're talking about everything: tzedakah and kashrus and Shabbos, the details of Shabbos and tznius, taras mishpacha, minhag Yisrael, everything you got to accept upon yourself. They don't know what the mitzvahs are. How can they honestly say they accept it if they haven't lived it and experienced it? How can they say, "Well, I'm going to keep all of Shabbos"? I remember we once had a guy here who was probably Israeli, and he had some non-Jewish girlfriend. And we said, "You keep Shabbos?" He says, "Yeah, I keep Shabbos 100%. I said, "Since when?" He said, "Since today." I said, "Today's Tuesday." Not keeping Shabbos on a Tuesday. So for that reason, the convert's got to be integrated in the Jewish community and live the life of Torah mitzvahs, besides from knowing it. So basically, they got to learn the halachas, learn the details, live the details, and be in an environment where we can assume it's going to continue. Live in an environment where we can assume that the commitment is an honest commitment and it's going to stay. If they're living by themselves in the middle of nowhere and they say they're going to keep kashrus, Shabbos, kosher, and everything, and there's no mikveh within 100 miles, and there's no support, and there's no schools for the children, it raises a question: is there really a commitment? So that's the process. The process is studying. There's no secret conversion course. It's basic Judaism. I know for Rabbi Fish, if you have the shul of conversion classes, but conversion classes should just as well be open to non-converts. It's basic Judaism, basic laws of Shabbos and brachas and taras mishpacha and yichud and interpersonal relationship, or whatever it should be, and the basic Yom Tov and laws of Yom Tov. Generally, it takes a year and a half, 2 years. We've had a family that took them 10 years. Nobody was Jewish in the family, and they were in no rush. They enjoyed the process, so they're there's no reason why they have to do it quicker. No reason why they should do it slower. Some people are desperate. They're young. They want to get married. They want to have children, and they do a little quicker. They're a little smarter. They're a little more studious. They study better. They're integrated in the community, involved with the shul, have lots of Jewish friends. So then it could go quicker. There are certain times when, like we mentioned, somebody comes and they thought they were Jews their whole life. Sometimes even yeshiva. They're in a boys in yeshiva, girls in a Beis Yaakov someplace, and they realize that the grandmother had a conversion. Sometimes not even that. They realize the grandmother married their grandfather, and they never had a conversion. In which case, the conversion goes much quicker because there's no need for all those steps to figure out. Do they know if they're there already, and we can do a conversion in a matter of just verifying the facts. So the general rule of thumb, it takes about 18 months to 2 years, but some people do it quicker, some people do it slower.
Yeah, thank you for outlining the process. Let me just ask a follow-up to that. I mean, I consider still myself a student of halacha. Fortunately, as you may know, Jacksonville does have a kollel now.
Yes.
And we're very excited. It's not on the scale of Miami Beach, but obviously we have to start somewhere.
One day.
Yeah, we have to start somewhere. And the kollel in Jacksonville right now is studying the laws of Shabbos, specifically the laws of Kiddush.
Correct.
And one of the things I've thought about over the time I've got back into studying at the kollel, halacha b'iyah and halacha in depth, is that it's so the information that an observant Jew has to know is just so overwhelming. I mean, Orach Chaim is just one section, one of the 4 sections in the Code of Jewish Law of Shulchan Aruch, and I think there's 600 and something, north of 600 simanim chapters, and each chapter, each siman may have 50 or so subsections of sifim, not all, but some, and each sif may have, loads and loads of information and details and complexities and with specificity, and that's just one out of the 4 sections of Shulchan Aruch. And then you have that's just the way of Jewish life for daily Jewish living, and then there's Yordeo, which is all about the kosher kitchen and all, and the Taras Mishpach, like you spoke about, so on and so forth. And then there's the Mechoshe Mishpat, which is the monetary laws, and then there's Even Ezer, the family life, and so somebody can.
We tell people.
It's just so overwhelming.
Overwhelmed, of course.
Yeah. So how
we tell people we don't want you to be a rabbi yet, at least the men, the women. But we want you to know when you need to ask a question. You should be at least familiar enough with the subject to know what you don't know. Familiar enough to know that you got to look this up. Another thing we do, which is very beneficial, is in the yeshivas and kollels. Obviously, you take a Gemara and you learn the Torah Beis Yosef, and you learn the Rambam and the Rishonim, and then you get to the Halacha and you're in the Mishabura. There's a shortcut. There's a way to work from the end to the beginning. The modern day halachic sfarim of laws of daily living, the Radiance of Shabbos, of Simcha Bunim Cohen's books. Those books are written, Feldheim and Art Scroll, where books are written for practical use, and those books are written more in an order, not so much of the Gemara, even not so much a systematic, all the laws of how do you shear a sheep on Shabbos or whatever, what's prohibited in the Malach of Goizes and what's the Malach of dying, but the opposite. We start from your kitchen. You start from your daily life. You wake up in the morning. Okay, what are you doing, in the 21st century in the United States of America, the way we live our life? Okay, how do we use the bathroom in our home? How does it apply to us? Our kitchen, the tools that you find in the drawer in your kitchen. What are the rules of those tools? What you can use, can't use, how to use it. The way to keep food, cook food for Shabbos, keep it hot for Shabbos. Not just what the Gemara says and difference between a kira and a kirayim and a tanur, but it's actually the stove, the oven, the crock pot, the hot plate. So we're actually starting from the life that we live, and we focus more on that. Another thing that we do, we tell people very much that you can't learn this on your own, like you said. If you're going to try to learn it from the halachas, you go to Hilchos Shabbos, like you said, or the Aruch Chaim, the 600 sifim, 600 simanim. But you need a mentor, somebody that lives a Jewish life, somebody that was born and raised or is living it fully. And we know, the laws of Shatnez, what applies, what doesn't apply. Between me and you, what are the laws of Shatnez? It's the phone number of the guy who checks it. It doesn't matter if it's spun together, if it's woven together. That's, as far as what we need to know is the guy's phone number. When it comes to the laws of kashrus, the same thing. You get the app and you see which kosher symbols are good. That's a practical application with all the laws of kashrus. You basically synopsized it, whatever, got it into an app. Is this kosher symbol on the product good? Which stores can you buy? And when you're traveling, can you drink a coffee in a Starbucks? Can you drink it can you stop at a McDonald's in the airport and pick up something to eat? That's this, loads and loads of halachas behind it, but the practical application could be 1 or 2 lines or 3 or 4 lines. And sometimes it's just knowing, hey, there's something, I remember something about borer selecting in Shabbos. Does it apply here? You call up the rabbi if it's not Shabbos, and you can ask him. But we do require different people, how much they can learn, how much they're able to grasp, they should grasp. To live it, and obviously people born and raised with it, you get it sort of by osmosis. Right. People that come in later in life, they got to learn from the books.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying that. Let me just ask a follow-up question. I think you mentioned apps and wealth of information that's out there. So I think probably our generation, more than any other generation as of yet in history, is exposed to a wide spectrum of viewpoints of, you can find a website of a rabbi somewhere that has a standard that, may not be mainstream or acceptable. And someone says, well, I looked it up online and, one of my I don't know how in your world, but one of the more popular questions that I get is from a congregant, nothing to do with conversion. Rabbi, I get a text, Rabbi, I'm in Trader Joe's and I have this symbol. It's like the Rabbanut from the Fiji Islands. Is this acceptable? I don't know if there's a Rabbanut on Fiji Islands, but it's similar to that. So when someone's coming for a conversion, how would you advise them, being that there's such a wide spectrum within, you can say within Orthodoxy, within what quote unquote halachic parameters, what the appropriate derech for that particular convert should be?
I don't want to get into any politics over here or get myself into trouble.
Let's keep it plain vanilla. Let's keep it plain vanilla.
Yeah, about where do you draw the line for what's acceptable, Orthodoxy and conservative, and in between, and where you draw that line. But basically, we require the potential convert, to be part of the community and to have a rabbi. That's our go-to point. We approve of the rabbi, we approve of the congregation. Sometimes they come to us and they ask us, we're living out, and we'll know I'm going to move. So then we'll have to tell them, where the parameters are. But we're relying on the rabbi. We're relying on the congregation they live in, on the community that they live in. That's what we rely on. The rabbi says, the CRC website, the app is great. You can use that because the rabbi told you to use it. I once, years ago, before the whole internet, I gave him a share once about Tzias Mitzrayim something, and one of the participants said, that's not the way it was in the movie. So, you got problems, right? Prince of Egypt, whatever it was at the time. So you're right, it's a problem, but that's part of the process. That's, again, the mentor of not the rabbi and the mentor and the community that you live in. You pick up that certain things are appropriate, some things aren't. You can't just Google a question and say, I saw it on the internet, when obviously much of the internet is not what we could consider halachically valid. But that's why the rabbi is so important and the mentors are so important. I do want to say that we're talking about conversion, that not as a rabbi in conversion, but simply as somebody that's been involved in it, it's very, very rewarding and inspiring. And it adds a lot to families. If people get involved with people in the neighborhood and the community that are converting, bring them to your house, hear their stories, help them out. It's a win-win situation. But the more religious you are, the more firm you are, the better it is for the potential convert and for your family as well. It's inspiring to find somebody that doesn't need it, not required that you can do it, and they're accepting Yiddishkeit out of their own free will. Many people were born and raised with it, never thought about it, and you'll ask them, if you had a choice to be Jewish or not, they never thought that question, they wouldn't know how to answer it. But it's very, very inspiring and uplifting and enlightening, and they need your help. There are those that say that the haftas together, mitzvah to love a convert, to love a ger, applies even before they're converted. So to help them, and to be involved with them, and to befriend them, and invite them for Shabbos meals, invite them as much as you can. There's a question if you can invite a potential convert for Yom Tov. Generally, we don't, unless it happens to also be Shabbos. But when you're allowed to, make them part of your life, and more often than not, the ones that are really motivated, l'shem shamayim, really motivated for the right reasons, you can learn a lot from their motivation. It's just a push for people to get involved more than just the rabbi.
Sure.
And also, there's so much they can learn by seeing a family. The kids stay by the Shabbos table. People that are looking at a book, I assume the kids are going to sit around the Shabbos table and they're going to just sing Zmiris and say Torah, for the 2 hours around the Shabbos table, until they realize that a 7-year-old gets up after 20 minutes and runs away. And that's the normal way of doing it. So They have to see more than just the books, but the practical application as well.
Sure. Yeah, that's very valuable, the integration within the community along the process. But speaking of the process, I just also want to ask, like from the Beis Din's perspective, what are indicators that the conversion process is going in the right direction? Like you see somebody when they apply, then you see them 3 months later, and then 6 months later. So what are indicators that this is going on the right and the appropriate manner?
Well, that's a loaded question. And again, there are many different scenarios of how the person came to conversion. There are intermarried couples where it's much more complicated if one spouse is ahead of the other, or even a couple that are both converting and one's ahead of the other. And there are people that come simply Shem Shemayim. They're coming and they want to do what's right, and you see what they're holding. But it's the integration in the community. It's the fact that Torah mitzvahs has meaning to them, and you actually see their face light up when they talk about the mitzvahs and the excitement about Torah. And a lot of it is the feedback that we get from the rabbis. The rabbi says, how involved they are, how excited they are about the Torah. And the staying power, we mentioned earlier about the staying power of the people after they convert as well. It's all the environment. It's if they're integrated in the community, integrated in shul, if they have children and the children are going to Jewish school, the kids are friends with the other kids in the neighborhood, and their parents are struggling with birthday parties with the from neighborhoods, and they're carpooling with them, and they're part of the shul. They're integrated in a community. Chances are it's going to last and it's going to stay. If somebody's single, somebody's younger, you never know where they get. They might move out of the community. They can't afford the community. A lot of single girls they want to get married. It's interesting in our experience, talking about a shidduch crisis, single people that come in their own for convert for no reason, not that there was Judaism in their lineage in the past. There's about 10-1 women, girls to boys.
Wow.
Men convert. They first of all, they can go to yeshiva if they're younger, and marriage happens a little easier. Women, it's harder, and they compromise a little bit more in who they accept, and depending on who they're going to marry and who they do marry, and the community that they live in, that creates a staying power. If they're married, they have children, they have a good job, they're part of the community, there's staying power. It's going to assume it's going to last. And then as you see the excitement on them when they talk about mitzvahs and they talk about Torah, that's what helps the process. And when we see that, then we know it's going the right way. And very often we ask the convert, 6 months ago, a year ago, do you ever imagine you're going to be where you are today? And often they say, no, we never would have believed it. I'm sure you see this in the world of Kiruv as well. Similar things. You see people's personality changes. Their face looks different when they become more religious and more connected to Torah and more connected to Hashem. And when you see that, then it's going the right way. But a lot of it comes from the feedback from the friends, from the rabbi, from the community that they live in. Obviously, we only see once every few weeks, every few months, but the rabbis are with them on a regular basis. So the communication with the rabbis, that's why it's so important.
Okay, one last question I just want to ask you as we're coming to the end of our conversation is you've been involved in this capacity for about 15 years, maybe even more, and you've seen many, many situations of gerus. Is there any one inspirational story that one heart, either a heartwarming or positive journey that you want to share that would be helpful for our listeners to know about? You don't have to mention names, just or you can.
No, I can't think of any. I can't really think of any right now off the top of my head. But there are so many, like I told you before, inspiring stories. When you hear them, it blows your mind. Sometimes you hear stories, on a Tisha B'Av thing or about a speech or a Pesach Kroner, or I don't know, Yol Gold, and you hear these stories about people that changed their lives. In just about every case, that people are amazing stories, and the challenges they went through. I mean, we have. The way they changed their lives, it's and why they changed their life and how they did it, it's truly amazing.
Okay,
cases,
just hearing hearing your face glow when you talk about seeing your face glow when you talk about it says it all. So
I just once heard a story that a Rebbe was once talking to his class in Yeshiva High School about conversions, about something, and one of the kids says, "Rabbi, why would somebody who's not Jewish want to be Jewish?" Mm-hmm. The Rebbe closed the Gemara and said, "We have to have a talk." The kids brought up with it. They never think about it. All they see is restrictions. All they think that they can have, the things that they can't do. They think it's more glamorous. Life's more glamorous on the other side. There's a famous line they say from Uri Zohar many years ago when he was coming Jewish. He was coming religious. I'm coming Jewish, but it's the same concept. They said, you probably think you have a great reward in Olam Haba because you left the glitz and the glamour and you became religious. And he says, no, the kid in Bnei Brak that was born and raised his whole life has much more because he thinks there's something real out there. He thinks all that glitz and the glamour, there's something to it. The grass is green on the other side. He says, I've been there. For me, Yiddishkeit, I see the real and how inspiring it is. It's easy for me to be from. Those kids that think there's something really out there is, without them having experience, they get much more credit than I do. And that's what I'm referring to. being involved with them and speaking to them and hearing their story and getting the other perspective, it makes you proud to be Jewish. It makes you proud to keep mitzvahs, and you realize how lucky we are. The Baruch Hashem chose us to be the ones to be this leader for the world, to keep everybody else, to be the morality and the consciousness of the world. We us keeping 613 while they try struggling to keep their 7 and look, how unsuccessful or whatever the people were throughout history historically.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. And we're coming to the conclusion of our time here now. So I just want to take the time to thank you again for spending time with us this evening, and we really appreciate your insights and wisdom and the experiences of Garus, of conversion, and I'm sure that's a very valuable information for our listeners here. So on behalf of a grateful community, I just want to thank you, Rabbi Braun, and wish you continue much hatzlacha on all your amazing avodas hakodesh you do, not only with the Beis Din, but with the Kollel, and continue being a great Marbitz Torah down there, and look forward to keeping in touch only for good things.
Yeah, and I just want to say how we're inspired by the community of Jacksonville. Actually, this past Shabbos, I had all the Kaiser girls over by my house. So we've been involved with this since Rabbi Kaiser was there. I used to joke about him. He's the only Orthodox community within 500 miles, I think, from Atlanta down to the time it was Palm Beach. And now there's plenty of others in between. Well, Savannah, I guess, might be closer. But the flourishing of Judaism, these small communities that are really taking the bull by the horn and bringing Kollel and starting schools and now girls' high school. Wish you much hatzlacha and success, and the community should grow and should have nachas from them, and they should have nachas from you.
Amen.
Should all be mekadosh Shem Shemayim.
Amen. Thank you so much, and thank you for your time again. Look forward to being in touch for wonderful things. Kol tov.